everyone, and welcome to our Board of Commissioners work session this November 28th, 2023. Our presentation for this afternoon will be brought by our Water Systems Director, Ms. Judy Jones, and she will be updating us on our stormwater utility consideration. With that, Judy, I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairwoman, Commissioners, County Manager. I'm here to give an update on stormwater. So I'll just give a quick overview. The water system is responsible for dedicated stormwater infrastructure outside of the right-of-way in unincorporated Cobb. We are also responsible for compliance with the Phase 1 Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System permit that we have with the state of Georgia. In 1999, we established in-city water and sewer rates to reduce fees for customers inside city limits for which we do not provide stormwater services. Some of the challenges we face are we have aging infrastructure from the 70s and 80s that are failing more frequently. We have a backlog of pipe repair work orders, many of which create sinkholes on residential property, and a backlog of detention pond work orders. We also have pressure from the public to repair sinkholes timely and provide additional services. So the last presentation last December, I went through a comparison of our services with some other counties and utilities. So I'm just going to go over a brief summary of that. Services that we provide at the water system that other utilities and counties do not provide include acceptance and maintenance.
Sir,
of
if you can please turn off your cell phone. Disturbs the broadcast.
So one of the services that we provide, acceptance and maintenance of detention ponds in new subdivisions. We are the only utility that I know that is currently doing this in Georgia. There are a couple that started doing it years ago and then stopped doing it because of the cost. So that's a service we need to decide if we want to continue to provide or not. Another thing we do, we purchase stormwater storage volume in private lakes. So sometimes when a subdivision has a lake, they need to do a repair to the dam, they don't have enough money for that, we will give them money to reduce the volume, to reduce the level in the lake, the standard level, lower it so there's more storage volume when it rains, and then they can use those funds to repair their dam. And there's a couple other utilities that do that, but not many. Another thing we do, acquire undeveloped floodplain property. We also maintain dedicated infrastructure on residential property. Some stormwater utilities do that and some do not. We also participate in FEMA's National Flood Insurance Program's Community Rating Service Program. That's a voluntary program that we choose to participate in, where we go through meetings with FEMA and they evaluate our programs and our services and our policies. And if we exceed the minimum standards, our citizens that get flood insurance get a reduction in their premium on their flood insurance. And currently, we are at 10% reduction of premiums. This last year, we improved our rating, so in 2024, that will actually go up to 15%. So some of the services we do not provide that some other utilities do. So these are things we don't do. We don't maintain structures in the right-of-way. So DOT is responsible for that in Cobb. So in some other counties and jurisdictions, the stormwater utility maintains the structures in the right-of-way. We do not maintain open channels in the influence zone of a public pipe. Some other utilities do that, some do not. And we do not provide riprap to residential properties for them to place to address stream bank erosion. That is something that Gwinnett County does. I'm not aware of anybody else who does that.
Excuse me, Director, can you go back to the second bullet? Can you talk more about that maintenance of open channels in the influence zone of a public pipe?
Yes, so some stormwater utilities will maintain an open channel for a specified distance from the end of a public pipe. So a pipe comes off the right-of-way or stops on a residential property. Typically, it's 6 pipe diameters downstream is the distance that they will maintain, recognizing that putting a pipe in the creek or in a drainage ditch, when the flow comes out of that, it changes from its natural flow pattern, yes. So there is some impact to the stream bank.
Thank you. And commissioners, if you have any questions, please feel free to just jump in and ask the director. Thank you.
All right, and here's a list of services typically not provided by local government, so we do not do this, and most local governments and utilities do not do this. Maintain structures on commercial property, maintain all open channels outside of the public influence zone, maintain pipe installed on residential property that is not shown on the subdivision final plat, dredge private lakes, and maintain private dams. So again, those are things that we do not do, and most local governments and utilities do not provide these services.
I think it's important to note that for the private lakes and private dams, could that potentially be considered a gratuity, or would that be considered similar to a subdivision detention pond?
So it could be considered a gratuity. That was something that if we wanted to start doing, we'd have to talk to legal about. So the challenge with a private lake and private dam is that typically only the people who live in that subdivision can utilize that facility. So using county funds to maintain something that all citizens don't have access to is a challenge.
Thank you.
So stormwater funding. So there's several methods to fund stormwater programs. One is utilizing property tax and SPLOST funds. Another is creating a separate stormwater utility fee. And the third way is utilizing water and sewer fees. And I am only aware of Cobb in Atlanta utilizing water and sewer fees currently to fund stormwater. So this is how Cobb Water funds our stormwater services. We do it through our water and sewer rates. So our rates for our customers in unincorporated Cobb County are higher than our rates for our customers in city limits. And even with us including stormwater in our rates, we still have the lowest water and sewer rates of the counties around us. So again, on this chart, we're the lowest, and only us in Atlanta do these rates include stormwater services. So we post this on the back of our bill. We provide our rates on the back of the bill, and we show both the unincorporated rates and the in-city rates, and we have a note that explains the difference on the back of the bill. So here's an example of what customers are currently paying for stormwater. So a customer who has both water and sewer service and uses 5,000 gallons of water currently pays $2.14 for stormwater. If they're only a water customer, so if they're on septic tank, they're only paying 84 cents for stormwater. So commercial rates are a little bit different. So a commercial property that uses 5,000 gallons pays $2.35 for stormwater, and if it's on septic, it would only pay 95 cents. So from this chart, you can see that as your water consumption increases, the amount that the customer pays for stormwater increases. So that is not really the equitable way to charge for stormwater. The impact that a property has on our stormwater system is from the amount of impervious surface. So the more impervious surface, the more runoff there is from a property, and the more water that goes to our stormwater system. So that is really what creates the impact to us rather than the amount of water that a property uses. So a stormwater fee based on impervious surface, there's more than 60 stormwater utilities in Georgia that charge for stormwater based on impervious surface. It creates a dedicated funding for stormwater management program. It can be charged as a monthly fee on a water bill or as an annual fee on a property bill. Recognize that charging on the water bill, typically you don't collect the same percentage as if it's charged on the property bill, because if a property is vacant and the meter is turned off, then we're not sending that property a bill. And then obviously some people don't pay their water and bill. They might not pay their last bill. They might move out of Cobb County, and so we might not collect those fees if they do that. So typically, a stormwater fee based on impervious would be charged to all properties in a county. It would be charged residential, commercial, schools, churches, and all government properties also. And residential properties are usually charged a flat rate or a tiered rate structure. So all houses charge one fee, or houses charge several different tiers depending on the amount of impervious surface. And that rate is based on what's called an equivalent residential unit. So that would be just the typical home. So what's the amount of impervious surface that a typical home in Cobb County has? And for us, that is 3,700 square feet is our typical home. So non-residential properties are normally charged based on an actual calculation of square footage and the cost rather than a flat fee or a tiered fee. So here's an example of what rate structures might look like. If we wanted to do a tiered rate structure, typically utilities don't charge anything if a property has less than 500 square feet of impervious surface. So our tier 1 starts at 500 square feet. So in this, you'll see the tier 2 is the 1 ERU, the typical home. So 53% of the residential properties in Cobb County fall in that tier 2, which is the 2,700 to 4,699 square feet. That's 53% of our residential. So, and then there's a tier 3, which is charged at 1.5 of the tier 2, a tier 4 that's charged twice the tier 2, and then your very large residential properties, we have a tier 5 here with 2 different options. One could be to calculate those like commercial properties are, non-residential properties, because they're a very, very large amount of impervious surface, so charge them on the actual amount. Another method would be to just create another flat rate for that tier. So anything above 10,000 square feet would be charged like $6.51 in this example. So between those 2 options, depending on which one we choose, if we go this route, it would change what the standard ERU would be. So if we have more than 5,000 residential properties that have more than 10,000 square feet of impervious surface, so if we want to charge those properties a flat rate rather than a calculated rate, then our base tier 2, our base 1 ERU rate would have to increase a little bit to bring in the same revenue. So at the bottom of this, you can see how an example of a calculation would work. 20,000 square feet divided by 3,700 square feet, and then you multiply that by times whatever your 1 ERU rate is to give you what the calculated rate would be. So here's some examples of residential properties with over 10,000 square feet. So on the left, you can see you have some properties that are on a very large parcel, and so they have a moderately sized house and a very long driveway, so the very long driveway is impacting the amount of impervious surface. On the right, you have just very large houses with a very large impervious area with tennis courts and wide driveways and very large houses. So, so to give an example, if we wanted to charge a house with 40,000 square feet of impervious surface based on a calculation, you would be looking at a minimum like about $23 a month as a minimum fee for that, versus if you charge them at a flat tiered rate, you'd be looking at about $6.51 per month. So again, some comparison here on how we're charging now based on water consumption and what charges might look like based on impervious surface. So a house that uses 3,000 gallons of water currently and has water and sewer currently paying $1.20, whereas if we charge a flat rate, be paying something, could be $2.17 to cover our current expenses. A house that uses 5,000 gallons of water but has the same amount of impervious surface is currently paying $2.14. And again, if we charge on impervious, would be paying the same thing as the house that only uses the 3,000 but has the same square footage. And as you see, you're getting to your commercial properties. Have an example here of a drugstore and a fast food restaurant where the drugstore has a lot more impervious surface, but the restaurant uses a lot more water. So currently, the restaurant is paying more for stormwater, but under a impervious surface fee structure, the drugstore would be paying more. And so commercial properties that have an awful lot of impervious surface, their cost would certainly increase quite a bit going to the impervious surface fee structure. So here's an example of what the billing change would look like. So if we want to go to charging for a separate fee for stormwater based on impervious surface, we would actually reduce the water and sewer rates for unincorporated customers. So at the top is an example of the change in the in a residential bill, where you can see that currently a typical 5,000 gallons, a customer uses 5,000 gallons a month and has a street light fee is paying $71.10. And then the same customer, if we switch to impervious surface, if the rate were $2.17, they would only be paying 3 cents more. So, and then I also wanted to just point out that the charge for the street light fee at $3.80 versus what the same customer is currently paying for stormwater at $2.14. So, and then the bottom is just an example of a commercial bill to show that there would be more impact to a commercial property with a lot of impervious surface. Their bill would increase a lot more than residential, based on the minimum, a minimum fee to cover just the cost that we have today. So we looked at several different options of services and what the cost would be to improve our services, provide better service, and then add additional services. So looking at our current FY24 budget, our operating and our capital improvements, so that's like our pipe repairs and detention pond repairs, those type of things, our annual budget is about $8.5 million. So the minimum charge under the fee structure where you had a Tier 5 flat rate for residential would be $2.17 a month. And then I'll go through the options. These are not in any particular order. They don't have to be applied in any particular order. If the board chose, we could choose option 1 and option 6 and option 7, or different options, but just shows the impact of what each option would be to add to the bill. So option 1 is additional positions and equipment for stormwater. So currently, we do not have any in-house crews to do stormwater repairs. We contract all of that work out. And so we are having a challenge with finding contractors that will do smaller repairs, because there's just not enough profit in it to roll their trucks and equipment to do those smaller repairs. And then when we do use a contractor for those smaller repairs, they always have a mobilization fee up front. And so we're paying a pretty high mobilization fee for a small repair. So we would like to have an in-house crew that can do those smaller repairs. Another position, Engineer 3 for additional plan review. We are struggling now with completing stormwater plan review. We're actually having to utilize an outside consultant to supplement staff for that, and paying a premium for those services. An Engineer 2 position, we would also like to have an additional one of those to help with the subdivision plat and final and as-built reviews, and then also to provide engineering for additional projects that we need to complete. The next position is a GIS analyst. We really need a GIS analyst dedicated to assisting our stormwater staff to keep the stormwater infrastructure and our mapping system up to date, to be able to help us keep the impervious surface as properties are developed, like a new construction comes in, to be able to update our records and our mapping system. That we need another staff person to do that. And then also a project manager, and then 2 project contract inspectors would be needed if we want to fund additional, provide additional funding to do additional projects. So additional stormwater pipe repairs, detention pond repairs, we would need additional staff to help get those projects done. So the cost for the positions and the equipment for that is about $1.5 million. So that would increase the stormwater fee by 39 cents a month. Option 2 is to provide additional funding for contracted pipe repairs of $1 million. So that would add 26 cents per month. So currently we have in our CIP budget budgeted $4 million for stormwater repairs. In FY23, we spent $4.8 million on stormwater pipe repairs. So we were able to fund that because we received ARPA funding to help cover some of our stormwater additional costs to get more pipe projects done. But that ARPA funding is going to only be available in 23 and 24. We'll run out of that money this year. So if we want to keep up with the pipe repairs, we really need additional funding for those pipe repairs. Option 3 is an additional services that we don't provide now, which would be to start maintaining the open channel in the public influence zone of a public pipe, and then also provide limited riprap to properties that have severe bank erosion outside of that area, and where we would provide the riprap, but they would have to place it. We wouldn't place it on the property, but we could help them a little bit by providing riprap. And fund that up to a maximum of $1 million a year, both of those programs combined. And then when the money's out for that year, it's out for that year. So we'd have to prioritize projects. You know, we would get requests from property owners. We'd have to evaluate them and prioritize them and decide which ones we could help with in which years. Option 4 is to increase the lake storage volume purchase price. As I mentioned previously, we have a program where we will purchase volume from private lakes if they lower their standard pool level to provide additional volume for rain events. And so currently we only pay 18 cents per cubic feet, and I think that dollar amount's been in place for 20 years or more, so it's time to increase that. So we're proposing to increase that to 25 cents per cubic feet. Option 5 is for the water system to conduct stormwater development inspections. So currently, community development inspects stormwater pipes and detention ponds, and then we accept them when the water system accepts them for maintenance and ownership for the pipes outside the right-of-way and ponds that are dedicated to us, so we own them after the fact. Whereas with water and sewer, the water system inspects the pipes when the development's going in, and then we own them. So we already have inspectors out in the field that are inspecting the water and sewer, so this is a proposal for us to also take on the stormwater inspections when subdivisions are being built. Option 6 is looking at more proactive maintenance of pipes, so providing $2 million a year to be able to go out and line some stormwater pipes when they are very old and near failing, but to repair them, line them before a sinkhole is created, before it gets to the point where the pipe has to be dug up. It's a lot less invasive to property owners to be able to line the pipe underground than having to dig up the pipe and replace it. Option 7 is additional funding for stormwater detention ponds. So the water system, we're in the process of determining exactly how many detention ponds we own. The property records are very difficult, and sometimes we have a problem with the county accepting a pond, and then after we accepting it, the developer quit claiming it to the HOA, so then the property records show that the HOA owns it. So there haven't been very good records kept, so we've been spending a lot of staff time researching all of the deed records, researching plats, looking at all the available information and determining which ponds we own. And right now we believe we own about 300. There are some others that we're still trying to determine ownership or not, but we certainly are not maintaining 300 ponds on a regular basis. So there's really a program, we have a program of about 18 or 20 that we really maintain on a regular basis, and then others that we just go in and do something when the subdivision calls us and says there's a problem, come look at it. So we need a significant amount of funding to repair these ponds that we own. So
I have a question regarding the detention pond and the fee. Is the $2 million for all 300 ponds or the ones that we know about today?
$2 million for the whole 300.
Okay, thanks.
So, and here's an example. So on the detention ponds, there's two different types of detention ponds. Before 1999, detention ponds were typically built on lots with houses. So the left side of the slide is a pond built before 1999 where the pond actually is on three lots. And so in that case, the pond itself is in a drainage easement, and the property owners are responsible for mowing that and keeping it free and clear of debris. But the water system will maintain the structure, so any structural components on it. And those ponds are not included in the 300. So, yes, Commissioner Burrow.
With these different options, like if we are going to maintain additional ponds, what does that do to staff? And is the additional positions and equipment in option 1 cover all these options, or does each option additional staffing goes with it?
So the option one, the additional staff, covers all of the options except for taking over the inspections from community development. So the community development inspections line and covers the staff for that piece. The option one covers the staff for all the other options. So that's part of why we would need an additional contract project manager and project inspectors to do more stormwater maintenance, detention pond maintenance. So
I don't see where community development.
So we've identified about 700 ponds that are in the category on the left, where we only maintain the structural components of the pond. The right slide is ponds built after 1999 were required to be built on an individual lot, not with a house. And the water system allowed developers to make the decision at the time the development was built, whether to dedicate the pond to the county or to dedicate it to the HOA. And so we've identified about 300 of these ponds that we own on individual lots. So for those parcels, we are fully responsible for the parcel. We're responsible for the fence around the pond, we're responsible for mowing the pond, and we're responsible for the structural components of the pond.
Director, I presume once you start, you can't stop. We've started this practice, and it's becoming an increasing cost. We continue to develop. There are some subdivisions that we're not aware of what role the county can play. I mean, it seems as if we could potentially be chasing our tails with this program. I mean, I don't see how this is sustainable if we can't even identify every lot or every parcel that has this. Has there been some consideration about us not continuing this practice?
So there has been, yes, so that's one thing that the water system would like some input and direction from the board on whether or not to continue to own ponds in new subdivisions. So there are a couple options with that. One would be that the pond entirely is just dedicated to the HOA, and the HOA is completely responsible for it. If the county wanted to do that, we certainly would have to require all subdivisions to have an HOA
Exactly.
to be able to fund that. Another option would be to start treating them more like the ponds on the left, where the pond is owned by the HOA, and the HOA is responsible for mowing the pond, the fence around the pond, and keeping the pond free and clear of debris, but the water system would maintain the structural components of the pond. So we could turn it completely over to the HOA, we could turn it over to the HOA and us still maintain the structural responsibilities, or we could keep doing it the way we do it today, which we allow the developer. Some of the reasons why a developer would give a pond to a HOA rather than to the county is that we don't do aesthetic maintenance. So we'll go out there and mow it when we feel like we need to mow it for the functional components, although as I mentioned, we haven't really been maintaining the way we should, but we're not gonna keep it pristine. And so in a lot of subdivisions, they really don't want a pond that isn't cut every week in the summer. And so that's part of why the developer turns it over to the HOA, so it's maintained more pristinely and more attractive for the houses around it. So there is, I know there has been a request to look at, rather than including the cost and the charges for maintaining ponds in the base stormwater fee, to have a separate detention pond fee, maintenance fee that would just be charged to properties in subdivisions where we maintain the ponds.
Seems fair.
So we are looking at that. Again, we're still trying to determine exactly how many ponds we own and how many houses are associated with each pond. And very preliminary look at that, but if we went that route, we would be looking at a significant monthly fee, probably somewhere between $10 a month to maybe $20 a month to be able to maintain those, because it is expensive to go out and mow and treat a pond. If you mow it several times a year, it can get expensive, and it depends, the size of the pond. The bigger it is, the more it costs to have it mowed.
Wow. So that means we are absorbing a significant expense. If we're not passing it on, we are covering that today for those that we do maintain.
We are covering it, for the ones that we do maintain, we are covering it in the fees that we collect through the water and sewer fees. But again, we are not maintaining them the way that we should be. There's a lot out there that haven't been maintained.
Yeah.
There are a lot that are overgrown, that to the point where we have to spend a lot more money to go out there and cut it because now they have trees in them.
Yes.
So we need to get the ponds that we own on a better regular maintenance schedule.
Okay.
So any other questions on detention ponds before I move to the next one?
Just concerns, more concerns, but no more questions.
All right. So option 8 is to provide some funding for future regional projects. So as stormwater continues to be a challenge in Cobb County, right now all we are doing is looking at projects that are just repairing a pipe, taking care of a detention pond, just immediate repairs. So I feel like we really need to be looking for the future at more regional projects. An example is Lake Laura, where we took over that dam that was failing, and as soon as we get approval from the Corps, we'll need to repair that dam and put it back because it provides regional stormwater storage. And so I think we need to look at other regional projects where we can do some regional stormwater solutions. In order to be able to do that, we have to start collecting funding. Those projects are very expensive. And then option 9 is something to consider, is potentially charging additional for stormwater through us, for us to help with the DOT right-of-way repairs. I know DOT funds that through SPLOST right now, and they have had, like us, they are seeing an increase in failures from these pipes that were put in the 70s and 80s, and their SPLOST funding is not keeping up with the repairs that they need to do. So we could, again, provide some funding here where we could help maybe fund some of the pipe repair portion in the right-of-way, and then DOT repair, putting the road back, part of the project. Joint projects, we do joint projects with them now from time to time where we pay for a water and sewer line relocation, and then they're, doing the road project. So we could do the stormwater in a similar way to help them stretch their SPLOST dollars.
You should have made Drew present that presentation.
That's why he's here.
That's why he's here. So
Understood.
looking at this, if we implemented all of those options, we would be looking at a monthly fee for the typical home of it says $5.01, but I would think we'd probably be, just charge the $5. But that would increase our budget significantly to provide those additional services and would increase the monthly fee. So we need to decide where we want to be as far as providing services to our customers and forward thinking with respect to stormwater. So to give some perspective, here's what some other utilities near us are charging for stormwater. So Austell, Ackworth, and Kennesaw, they charge $5. They just have a flat rate. All houses, no matter what size, gets charged $5. Powder Springs is less, Smyrna is less, Roswell's $4.95, Clayton Water Authority is $3.75, Douglas County is $4, and then Gwinnett County, they do not have a separate residential rate. They just calculate all. So an example for them, what we would look at be charging up to $5 for the typical residential home, they charge $7.59 for that same square footage. So again, the left side, the middle column in that is what typical residential 1 ERU would be in those other utilities, and then the right side is the calculated. So what a commercial would pay for the same 3,700 square feet. So for some of them, their 1 ERU is higher than ours, and some it's lower. So that's why there's a difference in the calculated amount for those.
We will be consistent with the Cobb cities at $5.
Yes.
I presume, if you can go back to the prior slide, not all of our cities have it. 4 of the now 7 do, considering Marietta, Mableton, and I'm missing one. What city am I missing? Oh, Smyrna's here.
Yes, Smyrna is.
Wow.
They're in alphabetical order, yes. So all the
So
cities.
everyone except for those two?
Yes,
Interesting.
currently have a fee. Ackworth just implemented theirs, so theirs is very new.
That's right.
And just, so what we're proposing is a tiered structure, so not every residential would be charged the $5. Ones that are a little bit higher would be charged more, whereas in these, in the cities, they just charge everybody a flat rate.
I see. Is it more of an administrative issue that's recurring to not charge the flat rate? Or is it just a setup cost that's more administrative to base it on impervious and pervious lot size?
So administratively, it's much easier to just charge a flat rate for residential because you don't have to worry about what the impervious amount is. Everybody that's residential property just gets charged that rate. So that is one way to do it, charge every property the same thing. When we were investigating this, we saw some utilities, Roswell's an example, that has the tiered rate structure,
Okay.
which means that if your property has very little impervious surface,
Yeah.
then you're paying less. If your property has a lot more, you're paying more. It kind of
Yeah.
spreads it out instead of everybody paying the same thing, but it could be done either way.
It would be less equitable if everyone was charged the flat rate. And I know from the town hall meetings we had, there was a lot of interest in ensuring that it was being considered by the county, the size of the impervious surface versus the size of the entire lot. Yes, there were considerations even for some mitigating measures, which you may talk about, like rain barrels or pervious pavers and the like.
So the next slide I'm providing just to show a little bit of, there's some residential properties that typically use less than 5,000 gallons in the winter months, but they water in the summer, so they're using more. And so this is just kind of an example to show that while some are paying less than $214 on several months, it does not take very many months of watering to cover some of those costs and increase what you're paying. So in this example, over a year, the property's using 69,000 gallons of water and wastewater, and they're paying $29.91. At the minimum stormwater fee, they would be saving money over the year, even though some months they're already paying less than that minimum because other months they're paying a lot more than that minimum. And then if the charge was up to the max of $5, they would be paying about twice what they're paying on a yearly basis. So, thank you, Chairwoman. You led right into my next slide, which is the credit manual. So, typically, stormwater utilities provide some opportunities for properties to apply for a credit, which is a reduction in the stormwater fee. So, if they do certain things, they can submit an application and have their monthly fee reduced. So, we are in the process of developing a credit manual in case this is something that moves forward. So, I'm just going to go through the things that we're looking at in the credit manual. And one is retrofitting the stormwater detention facility. So a property that came in and brought the detention up to the current standards would be able to get a reduction in their stormwater fee for a couple of years. Another one is septic tank maintenance, and that seems kind of strange because how does that equate to stormwater? But maintaining the septic tank does help with our water quality so that the runoff from the septic field is not have a backup of septage. So that's pretty typical in a credit manual to provide a reduction for septic tank maintenance. The next is no direct discharge. So some utilities, if there's a property that's right on the boundary, like right on the county line, and it drains outside the county, then they could apply for a reduction. Or a property that is right on the Chattahoochee River, that drains directly into the Chattahoochee River could ask for a reduction. So it would not be 100% reduction. Those properties still benefit from the things that we do upstream of them to maintain water quality and reduce flooding, from the water coming upstream. So they still need to contribute, but could qualify for some reduction. The next item is watershed improvement project. So if we're doing a project in an area where we're trying to implement a watershed improvement program, and we're trying to obtain easements or property. If somebody were to dedicate an easement to us to help us with that project, then we would give them a reduction in their stormwater fee for several years. Next is watershed stewardship. So to encourage our citizens to help us out with programs like privet pools and stream cleanups. If they want to come out and participate in some of our public education programs, they could submit their hours. If they complete a certain number of hours, they would get a reduction in their credit, in their fee. And then similar to watershed education, if they attended certain education, more classroom type education to educate themselves on stormwater issues and water system issues, then they could apply for that. And we're also using those two items to try to put together some programs for faith-based facilities and schools that are going to be honestly very impacted if we change the way that we charge for stormwater, because they have so much impervious surface compared to the amount of water they use. But if they can work with us to help get out and educate the public, then we would have some special education programs from them to work with us to be able to reduce their fee. Yes.
I have a question regarding the no direct discharge. Are we currently paying neighboring counties for any runoff from our county, from Cobb, onto their property?
No, we're not.
Okay.
That's an interesting observation that Commissioner Sheffield makes, because there are some basins that contribute to some jurisdictions more than others. And so I liked seeing the consideration for a regional detention pond, which would be Cobb-centric more than likely. But there have been some discussions in the Atlanta Regional Commission around stormwater, and perhaps that can open up the door to consider the larger impacts of just the way water runs here within the Atlanta region.
Some other items looking at the credit manual is for industrial facilities. So industrial facilities that have an NPDES stormwater permit with the state, if they document to us that they're in compliance with that, then they could apply for a credit. So the state, while they have a permit with the state, we have to monitor them. We help monitor them for the state, so that would help us keep up with that monitoring, seeing and making sure that they're implementing their things. We also are required by our permit with the state to go in and inspect industrial facilities that discharge to our stormwater to make sure that they're not discharging anything. So again, that would help us with that compliance inspection and making sure that they're not discharging something to our system that they shouldn't. The next bullet is hotspot best management practices implementation. So those would be for facilities that have a potential to impact water quality, but do not require an industrial permit. So an example would be like a gas station, a car wash, oil change facility. So they're not to the standard of requiring a state permit, but they certainly have the potential to put oil in our system and do certain things. So if they could come in and demonstrate that they've implemented some best management practices, then they could get a reduction in their fee. And then the next bullet is the low impact parcel. And I have a picture from a previous slide of one of the example of a parcel that's more than the 10,000 square feet, but has an awful lot of property around the house that hasn't been disturbed. And so you could apply for a discount under certain circumstances to qualify for low impact parcel, to show that while you have impervious, you have a lot of buffer area around it. So right now it's the draft is written for you. The parcel would have to be 2 acres or more to qualify for that. And depending on the percentage of impervious, the least percentage of impervious would be the more you would get a reduction. And then the next bullet, reduction of impervious area. So if a property came in and actually retrofits the property to reduce the amount of impervious area, then they would qualify. Not only would we recalculate it, because the calculation is based on the impervious area, but we'd actually give a little bit of an incentive on top of that, because it benefits us if the property is reducing the impervious area, so they could get maybe like a 10% discount for, a couple of years on top of actually reducing their calculation. And then the last bullet applies to ponds, depending on how we handle the charges for residential detention ponds that the county owns. We could have a reduction where If the pond maintenance is included in the base fee, then subdivisions that maintain their own ponds demonstrate to us that they are keeping it maintained, then we could apply a credit to all of the properties that they tell us to, so they would determine whether it's everybody in the subdivision or just everybody who pays their HOA dues. You know, the HOA would say, here's our documentation, and here's the properties that are contributing to maintaining this pond. Then those properties would get a credit, a reduced fee. If we don't include the maintenance cost in the base fee and we have a separate fee for a detention pond, then I would see that we would have two tiers. One for the example where it's on a lot with a house and the property owner is mowing it and we're just doing the structures. That would be a reduced fee because it's not as much cost to us. And a higher fee for the ponds where it's on an individual lot that we maintain. So if an HOA wanted to come in and have a maintenance agreement with us and say, hey, we'll mow the pond and you just maintain the structures and we have a written agreement, then we could reduce their fee down to the tier 1 fee because we would be changing our costs. We wouldn't be having to go out and mow it on a regular basis. So those are some of the examples we're looking at. For the credit manual with, right now we have it written, which is pretty typical, is you can do multiple things in the list. You don't just have to choose one, but the max credit you could get would be 40%. So, you know, you could do one that's 10, another that's 10, another that's 20, but once you get to that 40%, that's it. You couldn't qualify anymore. Yes.
So this is determined, the impervious is determined by each individual lot, correct?
Yes.
So our residential, like R15, R20, the maximum impervious in our code is 35%. So some subdivisions are open space communities, and the open space is counted as open space, and that kind of, well, so if this is based on each individual lot, how does that factor in
So
to an
right now,
individual lot?
right now, the open space in a subdivision is not included
That's
as a
not-
reduction. Now, that's something, if you want us to, we could consider is, as far as the credit manual, should we look at adding something for if a community has an open space? But we would have to look at, because sometimes those open spaces are dedicated to the county, and then now the county is responsible for maintaining that open space.
Yeah, no, well, the ones I'm thinking of aren't. They're HOA maintained as far as, you know, mowing or whatever, and leaving it natural. So, yeah, because you get a higher density bonus with the open space in the zoning, but you still aren't, you're using the open space as the overall impervious so that you're not over the 35%. But if you're doing it by individual lot, they could be over 35%. So
Well-
how do you calculate? I mean, that's going to be one subdivision that may have, like if someone has a pool, but and their lot is over the impervious, they're going to be paying more than somebody next door who doesn't.
So we will do some research to see if there are utilities out there that include credits in the credit manual to reduce the fee for subdivisions with open space. So that would be a way to handle that. Like your fee is X, but if you're in a subdivision with the open space, you get a 10% reduction or a 20% reduction on that fee
Yeah.
for that. So
Okay.
that would really be the way we'd have to handle that, was through the credits. So we will do some research to see if there are other utilities that are providing credits for that.
Okay.
Richardson or Gambrell, did you want to weigh in?
I
Excuse me
just
before you
had
do
one
that.
other
Let
question.
Commissioner Burrow finish.
With the water transfer down now to 6%, what is the total annual amount we're transferring out? Is it, at 10% it was 21 million, now what is it, do you know, overall?
Think it's about 16 or 17 million, but I'll look at that. Because while the transfer is going down, our revenue is going up. The percentage is decreasing, but what we're bringing in.
Because it's staying in water.
Yeah, I'll have to look at what we're budgeted for this year. I don't recall. It's somewhere between 15 and 17, but I don't recall exactly.
Okay. Maybe do it for, well, it just went to 6% for this budget. So last year it was at 7, it wouldn't be, well, let me know what it was for the last fiscal year.
I will do that.
Thank you.
Commissioner
That's all I
Gamble?
have.
Thank you.
Just to add on to the OSC conversation, a lot of times what is open space is not developable anyways. It's floodplain, it's streams, it's creeks. So would that fall back under the categories you had? Because I know you had one section for floodplain, and I know the county tends to purchase floodplain, I think if I recall you correctly. So how would that impact OSCs? Because we surely don't want to be going and purchasing floodplain in all of these OSCs. Plus, the OSCs have utilities usually as well in them, such as detention ponds.
So that's a good point to think about, that, yeah, a lot of times that area that is set aside is not developable anyway. So again, that's why but we'll look to see what other utilities are doing to see if that's a standard included or if it's not. And we'll talk to some other utilities and ask if it's not, why they haven't considered that, and that may be some of the reasons why they wouldn't consider it, is because they thought it was not developable property anyway.
Richardson, did you want to weigh in? Okay. Sheffield, you're good? Okay.
All right. Any questions on that? Ready to move towards code amendments that would be associated? All right, so if we want to implement a fee based on impervious surface, we would need to modify the code to allow us to do that. In Chapter 50, there are 3 sections: the stormwater management assessment districts, the maintenance of stormwater facilities residential, and the maintenance of stormwater facilities commercial/industrial, that we would delete those sections and then incorporate the pertinent information into the new language in Section 122, in Article 122. Or Chapter 122 is utilities, and that's the chapter that includes our water and sewer fees. And so I thought that this would be a good place to add if we were going to implement stormwater fees. So adding that at the end of 122. So the first section would be definitions. So it'd be all the various definitions needed for this section and of this chapter and related to stormwater. And then the next section is the purpose and policy. So it provides for the objective of this article is to provide for equitable distribution of the cost of stormwater management. And then it provides other statements as far as purpose and policy. So
What's nuisance? What's nuisance for?
nuisance is for if somebody is not maintaining their structures and it's causing problems to properties downstream.
So it'd be a penalty or fee
There's different ways we can handle it, and let me do scope of responsibility first. There's establishment of stormwater utility. Again, just states that we're going to have one. This section actually also provides, as I mentioned previously, that currently we only provide services in unincorporated Cobb. But this section here would provide for that we could provide stormwater services in a city if we had an agreement to do so with the city. So that would allow us in Mableton if we wanted to negotiate an agreement with Mapleton for us to continue to handle the stormwater in that area, then this section would provide for us to do that. And then the following section is scope of responsibility that lays out in a lot of detail what services the water system provides. I think there's a lot of confusion out in the public right now of what we do and what we don't do because it's not really written anywhere. So this really details what's our responsibility and what's the property owner's responsibility. It states that Cobb DOT mains the infrastructure in the Cobb right-of-way, state DOT mains the infrastructure, stormwater infrastructure in state DOT right-of-way. So it provides a lot of details of responsibility. And then the next section is nuisance. So yes, so a lot of this language was moved from Chapter 50 over to here. And so this allows us to take enforcement action if a property owner is not maintaining their facility. So if they're not maintaining their facility and they're causing flooding downstream, then, or impact to a property downstream, then this would allow for us to take action against them. So it would allow us to first go through court action to try to get the courts to tell them that they have to do it. And then it finally provides that if they still don't do anything and we need to, the water system could step in, we could make the repair, and then we could charge the property owner for the costs. So any other questions on that, Commissioner?
No.
All right, and then there's the establishment of the enterprise fund. So this just allows for the fees that we collect for stormwater to be in a separate fund that is dedicated just for stormwater. So it couldn't be used for water and sewer, it could only be used for stormwater, the stormwater program and projects. All right, then we have services, service charges, rates, and fees, just generally, so general information about the fees. The actual fee itself would not be included in what the actual charges would not be included in the code. As with water and sewer fees, we have a separate rate structure that we post, and if we make changes to it, we bring it to the board. And so these would be added to that rate structure and brought to the board with approval what the actual fee is, the dollar amount, and then if it was changed, it would come back to the board. We wouldn't have to go through code to change it. It would just be a board item. And the following section is stormwater management and miscellaneous charges and fees. So this just sets up that there's a service charge for stormwater services, and then currently in the draft, it also includes the detention pond maintenance fee as a separate fee. So that would be pulled out if we wanted to cover the cost of the detention pond maintenance in the base fee. So, but I've included it in here so that you could just see what that would look like if we wanted a separate detention pond maintenance fee. And then the next section would be the stormwater service fee exemptions. So there are certain land uses that we wouldn't charge, and so railroad tracks, so railroad tracks and right-of-way would not be charged. That's actually a state requirement that we not charge rail lines. You can charge the railroad facilities, like a maintenance building, but not the rail lines themselves. We would not charge public streets and right-of-way, so maintained by us or DOT, so Cobb right-of-way or state right-of-way. We would not charge airport runways, so typically the runways themselves are not charged, but the maintenance facilities around the runways would be charged. And then the next one are properties with a municipal separate stormwater system permit with the state or the U.S. government or similar. And so what falls into this category is Dobbins. So Dobbins has a independent permit with the state that controls their stormwater and what they need to do with stormwater. So similar to how we have a permit and all the cities have a permit, they have a permit with the state as well. And we have no regulatory authority over what happens on their property. All right, but other federal properties would be charged. So like a post office would be charged because they would fall into us as far as us regulating what's going on that property. And then another exemption would be basins that are used for water treatment or wastewater treatment. So at our wastewater treatment plants and the water authorities' drinking water plants, there would be some exemptions for some of the basins there. All right, next, billing payments and delinquencies. So this just provides for how we would bill. So it's proposed right now that we would include the charges on the monthly water and sewer bill. That's how we would charge for customers that already have water and sewer services with us. And then if it's a property that is in unincorporated Cobb, that they get their water services from a city, then we would send them a stormwater-only fee. And that we would decide we could charge monthly, bi-monthly, or quarterly. If we're only sending a bill for $5 a month, it might not make sense to send somebody a bill for $5 a month because they're probably unlikely to send us a check or a payment. It might make more sense to either send that, every other month or quarterly. And then the next section would be the credit. So this basically just codifies that we'll have a credit manual. So it doesn't provide the details of the credit manual, but allows that we would have the credit manual, and it provides for the maximum of a 40% reduction in the charges. And then the last section is appeals, which is pretty standard, to just provide that if somebody wants to appeal to something in this article, then they can appeal to the water system director. So that's a very broad overview of the code language. Yes, ma'am.
Just curious, since Marietta has their own water, power that they provide city residents, what is their structure for stormwater and regular sewer, water and sewer?
So for water and sewer, if somebody gets their water from Marietta Board of Lights and Water, then they get charged for water and sewer from them. The Board of Lights and Water does not provide any stormwater services. The stormwater services in Marietta are provided by the city, so their Public Works Department.
But do they have a separate fee for stormwater?
They do not have a separate fee for stormwater. Marietta does not.
Okay.
So they would be paying for it out of their general fund, I would guess.
But they get their water from the Cobb Marietta Water Authority like we do?
Yes.
Okay. Just curious. Because they're not on the list of the other cities because they do their own, but this fee would only apply to county and whoever gets their water from us.
Correct. So there are some customers who live in unincorporated Cobb, but they are Marietta Water customers. There are some that are Smyrna customers. There are a few that are Austell customers. So they're not paying anything for stormwater right now. So those would be some of the customers that would fall into the stormwater only fee charge.
Thanks.
That's the conclusion of the code. Any questions on the code language or anything else in the presentation? All right.
I know your next slide pertains to next steps, and as you were talking about the larger impacts being to churches and commercial property, you and I have touched base in the past. If there's a meeting of faith leaders, I think it would be prudent for us to have a meeting with commercial property owners and churches, even outside of that setting, just to provide a forum if they had any questions about it, since they're going to see the market increase beyond anyone else impacted by this. So that's something that you and I can work on, or if commissioners want to participate in that. I just think it would be helpful to provide that before they see a change in a water bill if they are not following this closely.
Yes, I'd certainly be happy to participate in that. So next steps. So the next steps would be to determine what services we want to provide, what funding we want to provide, and then utilize that to determine what fee we want to charge, or if the board chooses not to set a fee, what we would utilize to set our budget for next year for stormwater, as we are in the budget process. So we need to determine what services the board would like to see us provide. And then if we do want to implement a stormwater fee based on impervious, then we need to decide what that fee structure is going to be with respect to residential properties over 10,000 square feet, which way we want to charge them, how we want to handle charging for detention pond maintenance, and utilize all that information to set what the cost would be for one ERU. Also, would need to revise the code amendments accordingly, depending on what some of those decisions are made. They would change what's in the proposed code language that would need to be revised. And then next would be, if the board would like to move forward with this, would be for us to bring back to the board a vote on the implementation, on the approval of the fee and the code amendments. And then before we can implement it, there's some things that would still need to be done. We still have to complete our detention pond ownership research, and especially if we're going to charge a separate fee for that maintenance. And then complete assigning impervious amount to billing system accounts. So we've done quite a bit of, made a lot of progress towards that. So we've received the data on the impervious area for each parcel in the county, but there's not a one-to-one water account and parcel. There are some parcels that have multiple meters on them. And so you have to go in and look at those meters and then take the impervious amount and decide how to split it between those meters. Sometimes it's easy to look at and it's easy, just divide it by how many meters, but sometimes you can tell, well, this meter's serving this building, which is bigger than this building, and it might not be across the board split. It might be a 40-60 split. That takes a lot of just manual time pulling up these and looking at them. Then we also have the case where sometimes there's a meter that serves multiple parcels. So there's one meter, but there's several parcels behind it, so you have to find that meter, you have to determine which parcels, and then add all that to the charge for that meter. So that just takes an awful lot of time. In addition, when the impervious data is pulled, when a parcel is under construction, they overestimate the amount of impervious. So we have to go in and adjust that. We have been, over the past year and a half, tracking those as they come in and trying to keep account of like what the development says, hey, this is what we're going to build and what it is. But when we downloaded the information, we have to kind of go back and match those up and revise those so we're not overcharging somebody. So that just takes a lot to do. Like I said, we've made a lot of progress with that, but we still have a little bit left to go. And then the next step would be complete the credit manual based on input from the board on which items you would like to see in there. And then finally, if all of that is done, we'd have to program the billing system. So we have to change the way we bill and implement the fee, add it to the billing system, modify the way the bill is printed. So currently, we're in the process of implementing a new billing system. So we're changing from the software we're using to a new software. That is currently set to go live at the beginning of April or the end of March. And I'd hope to have this in time to include that in there, but I just don't think we're going to be far enough along to be able to do that. So I think we're going to have to probably push back the implementation a few months, so probably early summer. But there's a lot of work to do that if the board does not want to move forward with this, we wouldn't need to do, and we could put our resources towards other items that we need to do. So some of these bullets we don't want to finish up if it's not something we're going to go forward with. So I'd want to bring something to the board for a vote before we finish everything. And then also, if this is something the board's going to approve, we'd want some time between the time it's approved and it's implemented to make sure that we get that word out to the public so that when they get their bill, they're not surprised of what's going on. So we would need several months to do a public education campaign and make sure that we send information out to the public.
Yep.
For the billing system, the new software that we're going to, do we know if it's easy to program the credit?
Yes, so we have been working with them because we were looking at this coming along. And so, yes, it is easy for them to do that. That's something that's included in there.
Great, thank you.
I would think we need a public hearing or I know you've done town halls with this rolled out, Madam Chair, but I think we would need to have a public hearing, and we may be required to with I don't know, are we required if it's over a certain amount to do a public hearing anyhow?
Well, you're required to have 2 public hearings to change the code. This would be like a regular code amendment change.
Oh, okay.
But if you're talking about something before then, that would be up to the board how they would want to do some sort of educational plan or something like that. But yeah, after the code, after some of those decisions are made, I think what the director was saying, then we could start finalizing the code. The code could be approved, and then some of those other next steps that then would take their direction from the finalized code, as I understand it.
Okay, yeah, so we would need to do the 2 public hearings before we vote on
Yes.
on the code or the implementation or any of it.
But
And
just for
I would-
just for clarification, you were basically stating that we should have a public hearing just for the public to just be introduced to this to begin with before it gets to the point of the 2 hearings for the code amendments.
Yes, before our vote
Right.
on any of it.
And that's a good question. So you said BOC vote on fee and code amendments. Would those happen at the same time? Because I'd hate for us to vote on the fee and then there's no meeting of the minds on the code amendments after we have the public hearing. So my presumption would be those would occur within the same meeting.
I would propose that because I would think that the public would want to know if you're going to approve the code, what is the cost that's going to go along
Yeah.
with implementing that code.
Okay. It may be,
And it would need to be separate from our general code amendment package.
Yes, I would propose that we do it separately because I'm sure that there would be a lot of interest
Right.
in this.
okay. Anything we can do, I think, to educate the public with respect to this is helpful. So whether it's a public hearing associated with the code or something before then, it can help get the word out. And there were a series of town hall meetings, and most recently there were a series of meetings regarding the MSPLOST. Could be something similar where there's open houses in each district so you can be proximate to residents. If we have a public hearing here, that gives a forum for everybody to convene here. It may not necessarily be accessible for those in their particular communities, but I think we can err on the side of being generous when it comes to that, given the significant change in how billing will occur.
Yes, I'm happy to take direction from the board on how you want to handle that, if you want to do some meetings out in the district and a public hearing here, or one or the other. Just, yeah,
Okay.
I'll talk to you after this and
Certainly.
get direction on how to proceed.
Yes, please. I mean, we're not limited to just this forum, but certainly I'd encourage commissioners to weigh in and share what they perceive.
Yeah, I would just also add a summary on the website. Obviously, it won't be as detailed as what you shared today,
that's
but
good.
a summary with like some high-level points on the website would be good also.
So my plan was to actually post this presentation on the website, and when I put this together, I put it with that in mind, that this would be posted on the website.
Is
Okay.
there a landing page just for this alone? And if not, can we create one, Ross, as we've had landing pages for other significant undertakings? Okay.
So that it's on the cobbcounty.org, but also on the water system, and maybe a link that we can put in our newsletters this week.
Okay,
We'll do that. We'll work with Ross's group and get that done.
great.
Okay,
Any-
thank you, Judy.
and Any other questions or feedback? Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say excellent job. It's been a lot of analysis and data and community conversations, and just really appreciate you and staff for taking on that effort and to bringing this to us today. Thank you.
Ditto.
Thank you. I wish we could have done it a little bit faster, but I will say that I am proud that we are doing an awful lot of this work with staff and in-house. We had to utilize a service to calculate the impervious for each parcel, but other than that, we've been doing it in-house. So it has taken time to get that done with all the other things we're trying to do, like the the billing system implementation, because that is a very large project as well. So it's taken longer, but staff has worked very, very hard on this, and I'm very proud of the work that they have done.
Good. You should be. Thank you so much. With that, our work session has concluded, and I encourage you to tune in at 7 p.m. for our Board of Commissioners meeting. Thanks. We're adjourned.